You are listening to Let's Be Honest with your host, Just Johnda, giving you the legal breakdown. Hello and welcome to Let's Be Honest. I'm your host, Just Johnda, and tonight I am doing one of my favorite types of episodes, which is my Just Jonda's legal breakdowns. Now, we do these from time to time when there are some cases that we just can't wait to dig into. And quite frankly, there's a lot of them going on right now. I am paying attention to the Johnny Depp Amber Heard one. I'm not inclined to go so deep on that one doing a day to day because if you've been a long time listener of the show, you know that we covered that case when it was in Europe. You heard about crap on a bed once. You've heard about it 1,000 times. So what we'll probably do, at least what I'm thinking of doing, and I talk to my tech person on this end, is come in on that one at the end. I hope you can hear me. I didn't realize that my mouthpiece was up by the side of my head. So what we'll probably do is come in on that one in the end with the verdict and discuss our thoughts about how it turned out, and it's especially in light of the fact that the standards in the US are different from in Europe. But enough of that, because again, lots of cases, and we're going to discuss a few of them. We are starting tonight on our two-part special on the NeNe Leakes versus Bravo, NBC Universal, Andy Cohen, Sherry Levine, Stephen Weinstock, Lauren Eckelin, and more. In fact, she even has Doe's, as in Jane or John Doe's, 1 through 25, in case there's some other people and she just doesn't know who the hell they are right now. True Entertainment's being sued in this as well, in Truly Original Television, all of them. Um, there is a lot to say about this case. It's going to take a bit to get through some of the junk to get to the meat, especially given that out of this 77-page complaint, I would say maybe about 35 to 40 of it probably could have been tossed out of the window, and the same point could have been made. Um, you'll hear me say from time to time whether I think any of those points are good or bad, but nevertheless, the same points could have been made with a lot less. In fact, I find that a lot of this is so hyperbolic and so overblown, especially with some of the claims, some of them bringing in individuals other than NeNe herself who don't even appear to be supporting her in this. And so when you read it, not only does it get to a point where it, I hate to say this, but not only do you get to a point where it's not the best written complaint from a drafting standpoint, but also it goes so far into the weeds, it lends itself more to that you're grasping at straws kind of thing to make some very basic points. And also, as with anything in life in general, but certainly it could bite you in the butt when you're in legal proceedings, you can say so much, especially when there's a chance that you may be reaching on some things, that it ends up splashing back on you. And we have several of those instances that we are going to talk about where I am going to point that out. But just an example, you have Ms. Leakes reaching back 8, 9, 10 years, going back almost to the show's inception, certainly going all the way back into season one. Because for those of you who may not know, this show originally premiered in 2008 to bring up some alleged claims that since then she has continued to have on again, off again relationships related to that person. But then when Bravo allegedly brought up something that allegedly occurred in 2017, then all of a sudden they're bringing up dated things that don't matter. So you get into a lot of instances like that throughout this lawsuit, because again, um there are some things that may or may not have been valid claims at the time, had they been timely raised in the proper circumstances. But again, you're dealing with reality television and people's own behavior. So let me start by making a blanket statement that I think will is going to color a lot of my thoughts and commentary on this from the beginning, so that way I don't have to keep saying it. Now, what we're going to do over the next two episodes, this one and the next one, and any other we have to do as it progresses, is I'm going to take you through the complaint, starting with what her actual claims are in terms of what relief is she seeking based on the law that she is asserting was violated, or her rights that were violated. So we're going to start there in terms of me actually telling you what her claims are. And then we're going to go into her rationale for making each claim. I find that that is the most helpful for, I'm going to call you all lay people. That means people who don't do what I do. I find that to be the most helpful, because then as you're listening to the things that she is alleging, you can kind of put each thing into their proper column to say, okay, so she's telling us this because that lays the foundation for that. And of course, I'm going to guide you through that. Okay, so that's one. The second thing I'm going to do again right now is at the outset, give you a bit of my thoughts as it relates to how this fits into the framework, or the behavior rather, how the behavior complained of, particularly as it relates to her coworkers, and that'll become clear in a moment, fits into the framework of reality TV from my point of view. And I do believe that it is probably going to be a large part of the defense's point of view when they answer that. And of course, as soon as they submit their answer to the complaint, I will get right on here and we'll go through their response to the complaint. At least right now, I have not. I've been checking Pacer, but I have not seen one filed yet. They have time to file it. This was just filed on 4/20, so they certainly have time, because today is only 4/27. So here it is. A lot of what Ms. Leakes is complaining about, especially as it relates to her co-worker Kim Zolciak, and even when it brings up some of the other behaviors of the women on the other shows in her effort to show the overall culture that Bravo did or didn't allow to permeate both in front of the camera and behind the camera. Some of that, to me, and again, I do believe this is going to be a tremendous part of the defense, is part and parcel of what you get with what is allegedly supposed to be reality TV. Now, let me go a little bit further than that. When we're talking about, take back the if, when we're talking about the issues as they relate to things behind the scenes, negotiations, conversations that she may have had with the bosses, like Andy Cohen and some of the other names that are going to come up as we go through the complaint. Yes, those are definitely off camera conversations. And if they related to concerns that she had, then obviously it's going to come down to whether or not there is any documentation of those concerns, complaints, or conversations, especially if the individuals in question claim that either these issues were not brought to them, or that they were brought to them but not through the proper channels. They were brought to them, let's say, in general conversation, because as we know, for many years NeNe prided herself on not only being the queen of Bravo, but also within that queendom having certain types of relationships with the powers that be that the other women did not have. In fact, that was one of the things that she felt gave her a one up on them. And I don't think I'm just making that up. I mean, we all saw it, especially given her relationship with Andy Cohen. And I would go so far as to say, even taking advantage of that personal relationship with Andy Cohen in terms of the way that she interacted with him when things didn't go her way, especially on the reunion, or snide remarks she would say, or just her overall behavior. Again, especially on the reunions related to like not answering questions and getting snappish with him and different things that most of the other women probably would be reluctant to do because they didn't have a personal relationship with him, or certainly not one of the level where they felt that they could take certain liberties, not only with Andy, but in terms of their behavior with the show, with people behind the scenes, with camera people, with production and staff, because let's face it, we've all heard the rumors. So, but that being said, those are different things because those are off camera things. However, things that went on among the women during the hundreds of hours of filming that they do, things that were within, shall we say, the four walls, without lifting the fourth one, those things, as far as I am concerned, whether we like them or not, are part and parcel of what you get when you are filming what is so called reality. And that is whether we're talking about women making allegations like the type that Phaedra and Portia made about Candy, with the Candy allegedly wanting to assault Portia, whether it's the women claiming that this one's husband is having an affair, that one's husband is having an affair, questions about individual sexuality, calling each other bitches and all other things, their actual physical altercations, and yes, racism. And if that means that Kim Zolciak said things about not wanting to film with these black women, or supposedly using the N word, or just acting a certain high handed kind of way with the women versus the others, and not wanting to go places with them and what have you, those things, whether you like them or not, and we all can agree or disagree about the degrees to which one is better or worse than the other, all of those things fall, in my opinion, within the realm of the alleged reality show that you are filming, the alleged reality of behavior of these women. Because what happens when you say, well, no, it isn't, you start lifting that fourth wall, which is a bit different in reality television, right? Because when you lift it in regular scripted TV and film, then all you're doing is essentially, like, let's say you're showing a sitcom. Well, lifting the fourth wall is essentially just showing the audience sitting there. So now in it removes that suspension of disbelief that you are actually viewing the family from Blackish. You are actually viewing some individuals in their homes and again enjoying it as a show but make believe, and it is unfortunately reminding you that you're basically watching people doing a play because you're watching the people sitting there watching them and the canned laughter and all of that, right? Whereas with reality TV, it is a very it's a much more dangerous proposition to do that, because with scripted television there is no question that is not real. You know what you're getting. There's a script, there's a screenplay. I mean, it's a play on TV, right? But with reality television, even though we know that it's somewhat scripted, it is still supposed to be real for the most part. Okay, unless you're dealing with shows that have heavy manipulation because of like dating and all of that. Once you lift that wall and you start saying, well, actually, the producer told her to do that, or that person told her to do that, or this one, whatever, you literally strip down everything. So, what ends up happening is this person, Miss Leakes, who considers herself to be the person who built Housewives, which of course Bravo certainly rests firmly on, would also be the person who helps to tear it down. Now, again, if that house was bad to you, then knock yourself out, tear it down brick by brick. But that's essentially what we're talking about, which is tearing it down brick by brick and everybody else that's involved in it. Because you can't have it both ways. You cannot, on the one hand, and say, this is a reality show. So the things that people do and say are who they are. So if you have somebody on the show who is a racist and they say racist things, then that is who they are. Now, does the show have to continue to keep them on the show? No. And we've seen various issues come up, especially in the past couple of years, where Bravo has had to address issues both very current as well as some things that were kind of brushed under the rug several years ago, and then it came back to haunt them, especially in the wake of summer of 2020, especially with some of the Vanderpump Rules cast. But if while the show is being filmed, these things are going on, then, or things are being said, or a person is acting a certain way, then that is the reality. And you can either cut it out of the show or you can show it on the show and let the audience react to the behavior or to that person in whatever manner they choose. It just depends on how comfortable the producers are about that level of salaciousness. For my purposes, I don't see where accusing someone's husband of being gay or sleeping around on them, or a grown 40-year-old woman sleeping with the hired help, or yelling, out, one of y'all are gonna do certain things to me tonight, talking about Atlanta, or showing people throwing tables or purses or fighting, and things we've seen go on in New Jersey, on the New Jersey show, hair pulling, or even some of the microaggressions that were literally the centerpiece of the Real Housewives of New York last season. The fact that some of these things may have occurred, that is arguably who those people are. So if you're filming the reality of it, then that's it. So to me, part of that is the defense. We're not the defense would be, we're not fostering or in any way ratifying this behavior or saying that it's okay any more than we are saying that it's okay that you all call each other bitches, kick people, fight people, chase them down the road, um, call each other out in any manner of nastiness that many of them, Ms. Leakes being one of the ones who helped to pioneer it on the Housewives with a lot of this behavior. And then, of course, let's not even get into Miss Giudice on Jersey. A lot of this trash behavior, Giudice, Leakes, Zolciak, and a few others, but their names are always at the top of the list. Portia Williams, at least slick at the mouth, not as it relates to the physical stuff, but certainly slick at the mouth. Phaedra Parks, Kenya Moore, all of these things synonymous with the housewives and what they do and what makes any of them any worse than the other. Now, as we saw, like with what happened recently with Salt Lake City and Jenny Nguyen, if you find out that there are things going on offline in that person's personal life that's evidencing a very distasteful viewpoint and things that they're putting out there, even if on the show they are very thinly trying to hide that or not act accordingly, then of course it's up to you as to whether or not you're going to take a chance and continue to work with that person. And Bravo felt it prudent to not continue to work with that person. And I've had no issue with that. I think that was the right thing to do. However, if allegedly, because I'm still kind of giving them a side eye about how could you not know about the Jenny Nguyen stuff, but if, like with most people, they don't put their walk around with their white hood on and take pictures of themselves in it and post them on for social media so that you know how they stand, and you only find out through the course of dealing with them, or when they just happen to toss in a n-word here or there and you're like, whoa, where'd that come from? Then of course you deal with that accordingly in terms of, again, whether or not you are going to continue a relationship with them. But in that moment when you're filming, that's part and parcel of the show. What NeNe is, in my opinion, is attempting to do in this suit is to make some of, well, really a large part of what goes on screen, to use that as justification for saying that she was discriminated against because of how things fell apart between her and the network off screen. And that, at least from the standpoint of reality television, is what I find to be one of the most fascinating aspects of this case. At the same time, as someone who enjoys reality television, one of the things that's the most troubling about this case, both from what the reality television is supposed to be, as well as whether or not I think her claims as they are currently written are sustainable. And there's more that goes into it, but I just wanted to give, I know I said a lot, but I just wanted to give that overview as it relates to what I think reality TV is and isn't. And I think that it's going to make even more sense when I get more into this case. Okay, so first things first, and then we're gonna take a little break. Let's go into her claims for the claims for relief. What she is asked, and your claims for relief are what it is that you are asking the court to do based on a specific law that you feel applies. So her first claim of relief is based on, and this is a big one, is based on 14 USC section 1981. And this is a big one because this is where pretty much any discrimination claim, especially as it relates to race, this is the catch-all for pretty much all of them if you've got a racial discrimination claim. So this is what that particular law says. All persons within the jurisdiction of the United States shall have the same right in every state and territory to make and enforce contracts, to sue, be parties, give evidence, and to the full and equal benefit of all laws and proceedings for the security of persons and property as enjoyed by white citizens. So clearly that was written specifically for us, for African Americans. So the issue here, that where she feels that she falls, because you're like, what are you talking about? Give evidence, parties. I mean, she's filing a lawsuit. Why would that be an issue? This relates to the fact that she feels that Bravo interfered with her ability to make and, more importantly, enforce her contract, but really both. So she says that each of the individual defendants um, were causally linked, whether through their own actions or their unwillingness to act based on other people, their failures to act based on things that other people did, or that there was retaliatory conduct. And so she's saying that during all the relevant times of incidents claimed in her suit, and she goes all the way back, making claims, particularly as they relate to Kim Zolciak, going back as far as like season 3. And remember, this is a show that started in 2008. So she said that the defendants, and there's all the people I already told you. By the way, not suing Kim Zolciak. Keep that in mind because her name is going to come up a lot. It's not me that keeps bringing it up. It's this suit. She's saying that the defendants had actual and or constructive knowledge of the retaliatory conduct described and alleged herein above, and they condoned, ratified, participated in, or allowed the retaliatory conduct. And the retaliatory conduct is really not continuing to work with her or make contracts with her, because as we know, she worked with Bravo until she didn't. And until that last time, until after season 12, with the infamous shutting of the laptop, which I guess she didn't realize that was literally closing the door on her relationship with them, when she closed her laptop at that reunion, that it stopped contract negotiations. But before that, whenever she came and went, she did it of her own accord. That's why she doesn't really address it here. You know, when she decided to go Hollywood and Hollywood sent her back. And so basically, she said that she suffered economic losses, emotional, mental distress, the same thing everybody else says. The second claim, again, still falling under 1981, is that she was discriminated against on the basis of race, that all of this happened because she was Black, that this adverse employment action in terms of them not being willing to move forward with her, no longer willing to negotiate with her, that all of that occurred because she was Black. Her third claim, and this again under 1981, because there's several sections you can sue under, is, as for those of you who know about this stuff, you guessed it, a hostile work environment. And that essentially she was subjected to severe or pervasive workplace harassment, and the creation of a hostile work environment based on her race, color, national origin, resulted in a denial of equal employment opportunity. So we get that. She also goes on to say that this harassment was by supervisory employees, so other individuals who worked for Bravo, NBC, Universal, True Entertainment, essentially the individuals that she would have been negotiating with, or the production team, etc., and non-supervisory coworkers, because again, it all comes back down to Kim. Her fourth claim. Now, this one is it's slightly different, and this one is under 42 USC Section 1988. The fourth claim for relief, she's asking for a declaratory judgment. Now, this will get a little bit more into tomorrow, because this one is a little more involved. That one specifically relates to the fact that her contract, the one she continued signing after them giving her more and more money, making her the highest paid housewife, that there is an arbitration clause there that she and her attorney are now saying is unconscionable. It shouldn't be enforceable. It's invalid, etc. It also requires that the arbitration be done under the laws of New York and individuals from there. So, for a myriad of reasons, all of which we'll get into tomorrow, because we'll go in, on episode 2. I keep saying tomorrow, but all of which we'll get into episode 2, because that will send us down a rabbit hole where we won't get to the fun stuff today. That ultimately the court should rule that either that arbitration clause is invalid in its entirety, or at least in the relevant parts that she and her team are specifically pointing to. So that is more, in fact, that's actually something that out of all the claims, the judge really is going to have to look at right away if this case is allowed to continue, because of course the first thing that Bravo is going to file, so they'll be in court sooner rather than later, because Bravo, in addition to their answer, is undoubtedly going to file a motion for summary judgment, asking the court to toss it out, because she hasn't stated an actual claim upon which relief can be found. So um, that is going to be their first step, obviously, is just to toss it out, saying that she hasn't stated a valid claim. And quite frankly, I think that alone is going to be a damn interesting hearing, one that makes me want to take a ride down to Atlanta to get a seat in the courtroom, especially because since this is in federal court, unlike the Johnny Depp Amber Heard situation that has been holding everyone hostage, which is in state court, this one will not have cameras. So will be at the mercy of individuals who will be reporting out, Law 360, to various newspapers, or individuals that are lucky enough to get a seat in the federal courthouse in the Northern District of Georgia, kind of like folks did for us when the Tasha K. Cardi B situation was going on. So, at any rate, the motion for summary judgment going to be very interesting hearing, because I think that Bravo is, I keep saying Bravo, but basically all of the people being sued, right? NBC, Universal, True Entertainment, Andy Cohen, all of them. I think that they are going to have some very, very good arguments to make as it relates to not only her substantive claims, especially because of what she's using to make those claims. Again, in large part, the issues, her putting so much of this on the Kim stuff, as well as her making claims about the fact that their unwillingness to continue a relationship with her being retaliatory, when it appears that despite her saying that they didn't want to continue a relationship with her, that there was continuous negotiations that went on pretty much all the way up to the point where she called Andy Cohen a racist and a cokehead. Even up until the point which she admits where season 13 started, because it started in the fall of 2020, she was continuing to negotiate with them. What this was negotiations that fell apart. Even the spinoff for the Lenethia Lounge, she puts in here that, and we'll get more into it later, but she puts in there that they wanted to do that, they were only willing to do that for the quote unquote paltry sum of $150,000, which isn't going to necessarily play well, because $150,000 may be paltry to somebody who thinks that they should have the world, but it is not paltry to the average person. The other piece is untested and unproven as to whether or not your spinoff is going to actually work, because you're talking about a spinoff about a show in in Decatur with a bunch of people that they don't know except for you. There's also the issue, even with them wanting to initially not have her on season 13 at all, and then backing off of that and offering her 6 episodes at a set amount, when they have evidence that they can show that Bravo was going on a slash and burn with a bunch of their people at the top, Tamra Judge and Vicky Gundelson being examples of individuals who they had just gotten rid of, OGs of their respective shows, which within 6 to 8 months of this situation with NeNe, and it was well documented and known that because all the shows are a bit long in the tooth and ratings weren't great on any of them, that Bravo was doing what a lot of companies do. Theirs um, just happens to be related to television personalities, but downsizing, at least downsizing their costs, shall we say, by shifting around or just flat out drawing red lines through the salaries of some of the people at the top of the food chain. And given that NeNe and the network were having some problems as it related to some of the behaviors that seemed to cause a strain between the network and her during season 12, and even coming out of season 11 with the whole situation in the closet, with the cameraman and Portia, and then going into season 12 with just by the end having an abysmal relationship with most of the main cast, pretty much just filming with the friends of, and then we get to the whole reunion walk off. So it's kind of messy as it relates to all of that in terms of their back and forth, and the summary judgment piece. So that's going to be very interesting to watch out for. Now we're going to back it all the way up to the beginning. We're going to begin where we begin. Okay, we know who the parties are and all of that. I'm just going to mention a couple of these because some of these people, we may have heard their names, but we really didn't know them. Now we know Andy, who of course is still affiliated with the show. And we also have Bravo, NBC, Universal, True Entertainment, who deals with the production and all of that. So they're right there in Georgia. You're going to hear the names Sherry Levine, Stephen Weinstock, Lauren Escalin. Those are several executives and people in various capacities at Bravo. And then she has Does 1 through 50, who are just random people who aren't named, but may come up and be deemed relevant later. So, because of where the show was filmed, they are pursuing this matter in Georgia, but it is in federal court because of the nature of the claims that they are making. So, first, she starts out with uh, going through, or her attorney does, what they consider to be a historical culture of discrimination. Which, let's face it, and I don't say any of this to downplay any of it, is a historical culture of discrimination at Bravo, at the Bravo network, NBC. And she said that they maintain a corporate culture that's insensitive to Black talent and fosters racially offensive behavior that goes unpunished. Some of these things that she talks about are issues that are problems, or in the industry in general. So I am going to very high level talk about them, without in any way disrespecting their importance. But again, these are overall industry issues that, of course, they're adopting as a part of their claim. So that's why I say that some of this stuff gets a bit hyperbolic, in terms of saying, well, this is going on in general, so of course it's being done to me. We can make the same claims about literally every network, on television, except for maybe because I would say BET, but they're owned by Viacom. So probably like TV1, and Oprah doesn't even own anymore, so who knows what the National Geographic Channel is doing. And I don't know, uh, all black, pretty much. And maybe a couple of other small things, some apps, maybe, because Hollywood is what it is. So she quotes some studies done by Newsroom, at UCLA, McKinsey.com, NPR, about studies that 87% of TV executives and 92% of film executives are white. Well, duh. Across broadcast cable, only 24% of credited writers are minorities. Only about 22% of episodes were directed by minorities in 2018, 2019, while minorities represent 40.2% of population overall. We know for blacks, it's about 13%. But again, well, duh. And, hey, go and complain to Tyler Perry. He has a whole freaking studio, and he still insists on being the only writers on his shows, which he shouldn't be. But again, this isn't about Tyler. Love you, Tyler, but please get some other writers in there. Okay, so she talks about the lack of black executives in film and TV and its troubling trickle down effect to casting and off-screen talent. We know that these are issues that have been going on for years, and again, don't downplay them, just saying these are not things that we don't already know. She said that NBC and his parent company Comcast perpetuate the lack of diversity in the industry. I don't think it's just NBC and Comcast. I think you could say the same thing about ABC, CBS, and pretty much all the rest. While some of these networks, in particularly cable networks, may do a better job with, at the very least, getting women in there, we still have the minority problem. They said Comcast's 7 executive officers are all white males. Not surprising. According to his 2020 values report, 19% of Comcast Universal's total workforce as of year end 2019 was African American, which is actually slightly higher than our overall population in the world. Although, let's face it, we have a higher representation of that in the entertainment industry, which is what this is specifically talking about. And of course, they take a nosedive when looking at leadership executives. Sadly, pretty much again in line with the rest of the world. So the things that they are saying about NBC, I think are pretty indicative of the industry as a whole. But it doesn't help that they said that NBC is their lack of diversity is notable when compared to other historically non-diverse studios. For example, in 2021, the Directors Guild of America ranked NBC Universal third to last among 8 largest studios on TV Director Diversity Report for directors of color and women directors. I'd be interested in knowing who was second to last and who was last, but again, I just don't know if any of this is much different. from what we expect to see. I find it very interesting that they referred to Andy when they start talking about Andy Cohen when he became vice president of Bravo. He became vice president of programming of Bravo after about 2 years after they joined NBC. So Andy Cohen's pretty much been there from the beginning. They call him Bravo's mascot in chief. Snarky, I think, is kind of rude. Yes, Bravo and Andy Cohen are pretty much synonymous. He is basically the face of the show. And then, of course, or the face of the network, really. I mean, you can't think of Bravo and not think of Andy Cohen, whether it's because of the Housewives or whether it's because of Watch What Happens. And they even said that he left his executive in-house position, which some of us knew, in 2013, but he continued in his other roles, specifically being the host for all the reunion shows, which we know. Watch What Happens. He remains an integral part of their TV programming, including The Real Housewives, and he's closely related because of that. And he is an executive producer, host, and oftentimes friend to the housewives. So I thought that he was no longer the executive producer, but apparently he is. Either way, even if he isn't, yes, this is accurate. He is very much wrapped up in them. So the housewives been around from pretty much the beginning, right? NBC acquired Bravo in 2002. Housewives franchise began in '06 with, so it's a cute little history, began in '06 with Real Housewives of the OC, then New York in '07, and then Atlanta in '08. And New Jersey was also in, no, Atlanta was in the fall of '08, and then New Jersey came soon after in the spring of '09. DC was short lived, that didn't come until 2010. So, and Beverly Hills was in 2010. It's funny because apparently it didn't. So anyway, bottom line, relevant. We know that Real Housewives of Atlanta came in '08, and yes, it did change the game. But part of the reason why it changed the game, and we know that a lot of that did have to do with that personality and that casting that NeNe played a large role in. But let's not pretend that in changing the game, it was all positive, because this went from a show about rich women doing rich women things, which is what it was supposed to be. You know, this was going to be our 2000s version of the lifestyles of the rich and famous, but focusing on rich women. But when it went to Atlanta, other than Deion Snow, were they really rich? Well, we found out that no, they weren't. It, you know, you had women sort of perpetrating a rich lifestyle. So to make up for that, they did what NeNe does well, and there was a cast of people around her, largely Sheree and Kim, who was billed as her best friend, who took it to a different place that was appealable from an entertainment standpoint, even if not money, which was the shade and the drama and, you know, talking essentially like, and bringing on really flamboyant gay men from Atlanta to be their sidekicks so that they could get away with adopting their mannerisms and speech. Hello, NeNe, Tamar Braxton, Mariah Huff, and others. uh I see you, and we know what you did. This, because this isn't the way, you know, normal women, the way that normal women speak. It is the way you speak when you are adopting the speech and mannerisms of black gay men who have a whole like cool vibe and whatever, you know, what's tea, hey hunty, and all of that other stuff, and yes, and all that. Yeah, all stolen, all adopted. all appropriated, but it worked because what the show did, of course, it grabbed a black audience who really wasn't fully watching uh, the other two. You already had white women, but then it brought in more. These were also women of a certain age. So you got those of us who may have started out with the real world, but then aged out of it. So we had the next level moving forward. Because now we're older and we're mature, and these women are our age, although, and they're showing off. And then, so you had all of those elements. And then, of course, because of the outrageous behavior and the things that were being said and the shade and then all of that stuff, you had a huge gay male following in particular as well. So it was the perfect storm for all of these things, with this central, larger than life character who had, adopted all these mannerisms and all of that in the form of NeNe Leakes. And of course, playing off her sidekick, Kim Zolciak. And then, of course, you had Sheree Whitfield as well, who definitely could give as good as she got when it came to sparring with NeNe and Kim. And I don't discount the contribution of Lisa Wu, who, if nothing else, held her own again in some of the sparring, especially when things got hot between her and Kim. So you had that, and there's no question, it definitely contributed to the housewives becoming the crown of Bravo, with the Real Housewives of Atlanta being the jewel in that crown, which of course gave them even more incentive to continue to add the other cities, all of which makes sense. And then, of course, the best thing that goes along with doing reality shows as opposed to scripted television, they're cheap. Not building sets and all of this stuff, and you're not paying actual real high paid celebrities. You might be paying some C or D list celebrities who have fallen off enough that they are willing to do reality TV to kind of revive things. Candy Burris is a different situation because she at the time was not acting or anything. She's in the music industry, and that's a little bit that's a whole different vibe. And also Atlanta is a bit different as well in terms of how celebrity is defined, as it especially in comparison to say Hollywood. And in Atlanta, uh, being black famous as opposed to universally famous carries more weight than it would in other places like California or New York, because it's Atlanta, and just that sort of being a mecca for the growing, I guess, for one of a better way of putting it, black Hollywood light in terms of, some TV and film. So certain things work there that don't necessarily work in other places. So that happened. She helped with the casting. We know all of that. She's made sure that we know. She goes into, so we get the history. She goes into now saying that it was Bravo, NBC, Bravo, and True, that they racially segregated the Real Housewives franchises for years. I will say this, arguably, we can argue all day long about whether or not the housewives are segregated, but I will propose this. Even in a city as diverse in New York, because this is an issue that used to come up with Friends a lot, and of course it comes up with the New York Housewives. That show is New York is so diverse. How are you going to have a show that never has a black woman, never has a Hispanic woman, or whatever? It To me, it depends, and I know this is going to sound crazy coming from a black woman, but it shouldn't, because I'm very practical. It depends on what you're attempting to do. If the goal is to try to show somewhat realistic interactions between individuals who actually know each other, socialize with one another, have actual relationships of the type that their highs and lows, confiding in one another, friendship, happies, friendship ending, all of those things. If the goal is to keep that authentic, then the reality of things are that a lot of people are segregated. If you go to New York and you find a group of friends who of a certain age, a certain income bracket, etc., especially if they are, if they are rich and what have you, you may find two very different groups of people, one white and one black. Still both doing very well, great husbands, great this, great that. But chances are, but for maybe one white girl or two in a group of black girls, or maybe some girls of some I'm saying girls, some women of Latin descent in with a group of overall group of women of color, or one black woman that just happens to have a relationship with a group of white women, those groups are going to be segregated. Look at your own friend groups. Even when people complained about friends, you have a brother and sister, the people they were friends with in high school, and then a couple of other friends that they met along the way in college. It doesn't matter that they are in the heart of New York City. That is who their friends are going to be. They're white friends that they grew up with or gathered with in college. And so they're going to be very white, no different than mine would be black. It is what it is. So I don't think that it's necessarily a segregation issue so much as it's just real. You go to New Jersey, you go to Franklin Lakes, you go and you find a group of women, a group of Italian women who are tight and they're friends and what have you. And then they either have their family or extended group of friends. Guess what? They're all going to look alike. And, in real life, because at least they did start out as friends, Teresa and the Manzos, two Italian families that were friends. And then their extended family and other friends. They're all going to look alike. And the same thing when you go to Atlanta. So let's not pretend that something isn't what it is in everyday life that we see. It is not just a historical segregation that the housewives do. It's a historical segregation based on how we live and interact with each other every single day. But okay, we're going to blame the housewives because she talked about the fact that Real Housewives of OC's first 15 seasons, not one single housewife had been black. Okay, 16th season, they bring in a black woman who's also married to a white man. See how that worked out? Real Housewife of New York, she mentions it took 13 seasons to bring in a black housewife who, like many of them, wasn't married, only sort of kind of friends with one of them. And then you spent the whole season with her having to deal with microaggressions while simultaneously trying to school them on the world of blackness. Made no sense whatsoever and was not authentic. Okay. Real Housewives of Atlanta, largely racially segregated, but in the opposite direction because they had Kim Zolciak, who she brought on the show. She also talks about other spinoffs. She mentions Vanderpump Rules and how she goes into the situation with Faith and the black family, the situation that happened with her. So you got two two white girls who subsequently, 2 years after the fact, got fired from the show for something that they attempted to do where on the show. The show's who you are and what you do. Okay. Southern charm issues with things that went on there. She talks about how they brought on a Persian woman who then had issues with individuals on the show. So she just mentions that so she uses all of this background to talk about the fact that a racially insensitive workplace culture was tolerated and encouraged. Not sure if they would agree that it was encouraged. They're going to argue about whether or not it was tolerated. I think that unfortunately, they're just going to have to, or fortunately, they're going to have a counsel who just keeps it 100 the way that I do. This is the world that you live in. You don't have to like it, but it is what it is. And don't pretend that you don't know. Um, and she talks about various incidents on other shows in order to demonstrate that Luann and the Diana Ross wig thing and blackface with the dark makeup, certainly problematic. Um, Later referring to Native American as Indian and doing the woo woo sound. Um, Although um, another cast member did point out that it was problematic, and she pointed it out on the show. She talked about the Real Housewives of Dallas, the issues with Leanne Locken that kind of went back and forth for a while, and then we know ultimately they got rid of her. Um, Brandy Redmond, who also was on the show, and they had to disavow some of her behavior. Um, and just further instances there, the Ebony K. Williams stuff with Real Housewives of New York, some of which is still going on because, as we know, that show didn't even have a reunion because things got so bad among the women. And I think we talked about here, actually, I talked about on this show about there being allegations related to things that Ramona, who doesn't know that she's problematic, and that there's been reports about her saying this is why we shouldn't have Black people on the show. So some of these things that we've talked about before and that have come out in the news, all pointing to the fact that Bravo, like a lot of networks, have some serious problems. I think what makes the Bravo situation a bit different is because they deal so heavily in reality shows that a lot of these things end up coming out when the women, whether it's caught on camera or not, are going back and forth saying things to one another, or it being caught in casual conversations where the women get a little comfortable. Whereas on other networks where most people don't say much that somebody didn't write for them, that they don't get caught with their pants down quite as much. And when actors or even network executives get in trouble from those types of networks, it tends to be something that the actors said or did offline or in their personal life, or some memos or emails going back and forth among network executives. It's a little tougher when you're dealing with people on reality shows because their stuff is just a constant barrage of the stream of consciousness of people who probably shouldn't have mics in front of them most of the time. Because let's face it, most of us shouldn't most of the time. And of course, what they count on is eventually you get comfortable. And like they used to say on The Real World, when people, what did they say? When people stop being, what they say, people stop being friendly or stop being something and start being real. This is the real world. And that's what they count on, right? With any reality show, that after you are filming for hours and hours and hours, and the cameras are up in your house, and the camera people, if they're smart, sort of will fade into the background and what have you, that you'll get comfortable. And when you get comfortable, that's when your keeping it real gets a bit too damn real and people find out about you. Either you get comfortable, or the other one, which we know they love, which is why they put these women in powder keg situations like these trips, is they get angry. And of course, when people get angry, the sparks fly. When the sparks fly, so does a whole lot of stuff that nobody should be catching. So she moves on. They talk about, and she talks about how even though the New York trip, New York didn't go on, and as we know, they're doing a full revamp of New York. We've talked about on this show as well, but that um, Ramona Singer did get the Real Housewives Ultimate Girls Trip, and so did Luann de Lesseps, who is constantly in messes, doing all kinds of stuff. And quite frankly, we know that Phaedra got the Ultimate Girls Trip, the second season, which should be coming out anytime now, despite the fact that you were allegedly fired because of the really outrageous scheme between you and Portia to say the things that she did, between her and Portia, to say the things that she did about Candy. And let's face it, we know that the only reason why at this point Phaedra is not back on the Real Housewives of Atlanta is because Candy refuses to film with her. Because if you're going to bring her back for another show with a bunch of other housewives, then clearly you really don't care that she orchestrated a situation with another cast member to put out really harmfully slanderous or defamatory, really, information about another cast member that uh, could have, and still in some ways have had, tremendous consequences. Because anything that goes halfway left in Candy's life, I mean, I swear she could turn left on a red light, and people will be like, well, you know that they said she's a freak and she did, and that didn't, and a lot of that has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that she has bedroom candy. It's because of the allegations. So of course, can't have this discussion, right, without going into the whole Jenny Nguyen situation from Salt Lake City. So of course, she talked about the fact that she was on the show. Then she even jumps off of the Housewives, and they talk about the America's Got Talent situation with Gabrielle Union, and how she filed a complaint with the state of California's Fair Employment Office alleging racial discrimination and a toxic work environment on that show. So, so this, she is really going very deep into that whole piece. So let's now move ahead. So we know she's given a full background to say NBC is racist, period. Well, is that the end? No. Is that a slam dunk? No. Not in my opinion, because you still have to show how this all related to the specific situation involving you, because all of the things that you named were already conditions, a lot of things arguably known and present. And for many, including myself, from the outside looking in, you were kind of fine with them, as long as not only was Atlanta the jewel in the crown of Bravo, but more importantly, you were the person wearing that, you were the person wearing that crown. You were the person, as you said, as your lawyers allege, this is all the house that you built, and you expect it to be treated accordingly at all times, no matter what you did or didn't do, and what your relationship was with the network, even if it soured. Now, there are those who would say, yeah, and if this is my house, I'll do what I want and act the way I want, and you just have to live with it. Well, but is it really? Because if it really was yours, you wouldn't need them to write your check, right? You'd be writing the check because it's your show. But it's not. And that's the problem. All of these relationships, friendships, shows, and all of that were fine until they weren't. You were fine with saying who should and shouldn't be on the show until somebody said you shouldn't be on the show. You were fine with telling Andy Cohen to keep your name out of his mouth until a few months ago when you said you'd be willing to talk to them and try to rebuild the relationship. And when Andy Cohen was asked about it, he said, and I quote, "She asked me to keep her name out of my mouth, and that is what I'm going to do." Period, unquote. This is, of course, after he had been labeled a racist and a cokehead. Now, are there some issues with Andy Cohen? No, we could have a whole conversation about that. No doubt about the fact that there are some things that I definitely call into question with how he behaves towards certain housewives versus others. And yes, I do think, as we've seen on the reunions, that it does seem to be a very different way in terms of his comfort level with the shade and some of the slick stuff that comes out of his mouth with the black housewives versus when he has some of those white ones sitting there. Questions that he'll ask people about their income and how they're living as it relates to feeling like Bravo made them. Kind of like when Monique Samuels had to let him know that that little check wasn't life changing for her and Chris, versus him never even thinking to ask Lisa Vanderpump that, or even Kyle Richards, who, let's face it, Mauricio, who is really the big breadwinner around there, other than her Bravo checks and her little store. And there's always all kinds of problems going on there. But unless there's something in the news where one of them is being sued, where he doesn't have any choice because it's all over the place to ask them about their income, he doesn't play those games with them. So are there some issues with Andy? I'm giving him the side eye. And I think a lot of us have given him the side eye for a number of years, except when it comes to NeNe. Why? No hate against NeNe at all. It's because despite the fact that he tends to be that way with other people and other guests, she didn't seem to have a problem with it as long as he was her bestie and she was there, number one on the list to throw his baby shower. But we'll continue. She was the most frequent guest on Watch What Happens Live. He tweeted October 23rd, 2018, Rojas, the house that NeNe built, that she's an icon of a genre. She is a gift and a catchphrase machine. True. Absolutely true. Most frequent guests on Watch What Happens Live. She's always a blast. She called him Buttercup the day they met. And through their whole run, she's always had a serious concern and drive to maintain the success and well-being of Roja. And it's from my understanding that NeNe was the person who suggested the reunions that, of course, they do for everything. And apparently that Laura Eckelin of True, she's their vice president of programming, said Roja is not Roja without Ms. Leakes. I don't think anybody would ever take any of that away from her. But at a certain point, you know, it's the sun sets. And in this particular instance, the sun set on her tenure in a show in at a time and in a manner that she didn't particularly care for. But would that be negotiations? Or, because they did go from saying we don't want you for season 12, season 13 at all, and then going back to the 6 seasons. The 6 episodes plus a potential plus a potential additional show. But he's a racist and a cokehead. So now we get into the meat and potatoes, and I'm gonna touch base on this for about 5 minutes, and then we're gonna wrap up because and then part two, come back because we are really gonna dig into this Zolciak stuff. So this is where she really starts to finally go from, and I'm saying we got paragraphs 1 through 59 before we get into where she really starts lining up what allegedly happened to her. And again, saying allegedly not to be disrespectful, but because I wasn't there. I'm just telling you what she said. So these are all allegations. She said that she was subjected to racially offensive conduct and treatment on Roja. She said that NBC, Bravo, and True condone, accept, and tolerate the work-related racially offensive behavior. So the main person she lays this on, and so this is what jumps off the whole next barrage of pages regarding Kim. So I'm just going to read this part to you, and then we'll talk about it. So she said in the early years, housewife Kim Zolciak Bierman, because remember she got married, the sole white housewife on Roja, repeatedly engages in racially offensive behavior. Rather than subjecting her to appropriate remedial action, NBC, Bravo, and True reward her with special perks and privileges denied to the black housewives. Ms. Leakes and the other black housewives speak up, but nothing is done to stop Zolciak Bierman's racially offensive behavior. Mind you, none of the other black housewives are joining in this suit or making statements. Candy was asked about it as recently as today and said, and they asked her what does she think about it. She basically said, I don't think anything about it and not going to talk about it. And Marlo pretty much didn't say much either. So, and I'm sure that they don't feel comfortable saying anything or getting into it anyway, but that's basically what it is. So the first season of Roja premiered on October 7th, 2008. And the lead housewives, as we know, was NeNe Leakes, Lisa Wu, Deshawn Snow, Sheree Whitfield, and Kim Zolciak Bierman. All the housewives were black other than her. She said from the outset that Kim was racist and being racially insensitive, which is very interesting because that season 1 was all about them being besties. Yes, they had their highs and lows. I don't remember if that was reunion season 1 or season 2 with keep your legs closed to married men's. Not really sure, but yes, they had issues, but always managed to be besties again. And by the way, even during the pandemic, did some lives together, and Kim was one of the invited guests to Greg's wake, but I digress. So she said that even during season 1, so we're going back to season 1, 2008, she said that they were planning a barbecue. Kim and one of them asked NeNe about going. I think it was at Deshawn's house, and they asked Kim about going, and she said, I don't want to sit around with NeNe and eat chicken. So she said that that was an assumption that the barbecue would include eating chicken, which perpetuated a negative stereotype of African Americans. She said it became that, well, her attorney says it was clear that that was normal conduct for her. It was not an aberration, she said, because when she appeared in March of 2010 on Candy's Candy Coated Nights, she used the N word when describing the hip hop group NWA, with Ice Cube. Another example, 2012, in the fifth season, she said Kim made racially stereotypical remarks about Candy's new home. If you're a watcher, remember when she was driving to Candy's house when Candy initially brought the two houses and she was in the process of joining them together. And she said that basically the neighborhood was ghetto, and also something about it, and also questioning why Candy needed a pool because, according to Zolciak Bierman, blacks don't swim. Um, she said that those and other similar comments, she said she was also treated differently. That she was treated better than them. She talks about her being given special perks like choosing whether or not she wanted to film, being allowed to leave before filming was concluded when she got married, demanding that her husband or family um, be included in the filming, avoiding filming during her pregnancy or parts of her pregnancy when Phaedra was denied that right to film. She claims that Phaedra was denied that right. When Phaedra first came on pregnant, she was a new housewife, so I don't know if she was in a position to really make any demands about anything. Um, being allowed to demand when that her family be included on trips when others were denied to do so. She said that by mid 2012, that she and other Black housewives raised concerns to network executives regarding Kim's different treatment or being treated better than them. And she claimed that she also um, communicated her concerns to I think at this point she said to Weinstock, so that's why Weinstock's True's president, so that's why he is named as well. And she said that they even had a meeting in 2012. So this means that if this goes to trial, there's other housewives, whether they want it or not, that are going to be dragged into this, because they said at the meeting that she told them that Kim was being afforded special treatment and the racially offensive comments, and that they fell on deaf ears. And she said that in 2012, that when Kim got into a dispute with some of the housewives, she said, "These bitches are not my friends, and I don't know any of these effing," she claims, N words anymore. So supposedly she said they weren't her friends and called them effing N words. Um, and she basically said that ultimately Bravo, essentially she's saying Kim's been wilding out, and that Bravo didn't repudiate any of her behavior or take any remedial action, and is instead pretty much emboldened her by continuing to promote her career. As we know, her big departure, we know that she came back a little bit later on, but the big departures came in season 5. She claimed after more racially offensive behavior, and then she got her wedding special, she got her spinoff, and even despite all of that and the fact that they were having issues with these women, she was able to return later on. Now, the interesting thing is, NeNe advocated for that return that she had much later. Now, it ended up biting her in the butt because Kim came back and said she had a roach in her house, but she advocated her return. But for most of us, we know she advocated her return because Kim, for God only knows what reason, because they were barely on the show together at the same time, had an issue with Kenya. So, of course, she had no issue with Kim coming back to antagonize Kenya. Kim, as we know, got a wedding special in 2012, Don't Be Tardy for the Wedding, and that ultimately spun off into her series, which nobody can figure out why that was on for 8 seasons. I mean, talk about corporate welfare. I mean, we all should be suing about her having a show on for 8 seasons. My God. Um, I don't know when it came on, how many episodes it was a season. Like it was just absolutely unwatchable. If anybody should be suing, it should be Sweetie. So now we also know that both Candy and NeNe got wedding specials, and then Candy got additional specials with Escape, her family ski trip, and her current run of Candy and the Gang, which I hope she does get a season 2 on because it's such an interesting cast. And the ratings, contrary to NeNe's snide remarks, now that even though now she's conveniently bringing Candy up, her ratings did go up quite substantially once the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City ended. And so I think it really came down to what Bravo probably knew as well, which is that it had a lead in that was so opposite the audience for Candy's show, and now it doesn't have that lead in, so it's not bogged down by that. And of course, we'll get an even bigger bump because it ends the night that Atlanta starts next week. I think it's Sunday the 8th. Anyway, her departure in season 5 was pretty much right after her show began to air. Now, the really funny thing is that, again, talk about just blowing things, making them huge, is that her attorney says the Black housewives hope to receive a reprieve from her racially offensive ways. Now, Kim came back in season 9. She came back for the finale in season 9. So she wasn't there the whole time. That was in April 2017. But then she was back for all of season 10. And we know that as soon as season 10 started, we were dealing with what? Roachgate. And everything went to hell in a handbasket between her and Kim from there, straight through to the reunion. But when we come back with part 2 of this, we're going to get into what I think is some pretty interesting stuff for sure about and probably the only part of her case that, despite the fact that it still has a lot to do with Kim, the only part of her case where I actually think if her and her attorney tweak it just right, it might be the key to her surviving the summary judgment hearing and at least getting this to trial. Winning, well, that's a whole other thing. But at least getting over that initial hump of having this tossed before you can potentially get it in front of a jury that might be sensitive to these racial issues, or at least allegations of a racial culture. And because of a certain sensitivity to that, may not, I hate to say this, but may not get bogged down in the law like they're supposed to, when it comes to saying, okay, yes, there was racism, yes, there was this and that and the third, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she has prevailed on her claim of alleging that because of these issues she was not afforded an ability to work and an appropriate contract. She was retaliated against, that her entire environment was inherently hostile despite her contributions to a certain atmosphere in that environment for both the person she's making these allegations against, as well as her other coworkers and other individuals on the set, production and others. Because you can best believe, if this situation makes it to trial, all of the whispered rumors that we've heard about Miss Leakes and her antics over the years, Bravo and their army of lawyers will have no problem. Well, Bravo, True, Andy, and what have you, because there's a whole bunch of people being sued. So you're going to end up with an army of lawyers, because all of these people are different companies, are going to have no problem whatsoever putting all of this stuff out there. So the can of worms that gets opened on this is huge and ugly. On the one hand, potentially dismantling the show because of lifting that fourth wall on reality television, or the Housewives franchise in particular, even more so than the book that came out a few months ago, as well as it hurting her career and reputation even more than the damage she has already done. So, or that she would allege has been done to her. So this is going to, so it could potentially get worse before it gets better. It'll certainly be, quite a bit of entertaining for those of us on the outside looking in. But all of that being said, as I said, this, as we get into Roachgate and deeper into that and the fallout from that, particularly some of the back and forth that she had with executives, some of which is in writing, that's gonna be the best meat and potatoes if she brings the right team in to craft that a little bit better than is crafted in this complaint and argue it. That, like I said, could be her key to surviving summary judgment. And we're going to talk more about that tomorrow, and maybe even me explain the summary judgment piece a little bit more once, tonight, when I get look a little bit deeper into what else we have to do. Then I'll determine how much of the the kind of procedural stuff we'll get into. But I hope you enjoyed this show. I know you got a lot of my own commentary, but I think that a lot of what I said, even though it was sort of broad as it relates to this, put it into context for you as I also talked about the case and the allegations itself. So stay tuned, come back for part 2. Please go back and listen to some of our other shows. We will be shifting to, we're going to keep the podcast, but also add the YouTube element within the next week or so. Just trying to work out some some tech tweaks around here to make the viewing of it not look like yeek, and learning a little bit more about the software that we have prepared for it, so that I'm not blanking myself off the screen when you are watching the video. So looking forward to adding that element and having a lot more conversations with you, finishing up this, and just lots more good shows. So as always, continue to follow me on all social media, including Facebook. You'll see the link in the info box, as well as Instagram, where it's Let's Be Honest JJ, Twitter, Let's Be Honest JJ, Facebook, The Fashion and Drama Diaries. You can find the link in the info box above. And what else do we have? Okay, of course, support the show, support your girl. You have the Venmo and Cashapp information there as well, that helps us do what we do and take the time to do the research. And other than that, you know how we do it. If you want to talk about it, chances are I'm interested in it and I want to talk about it too, especially on the legal breakdown when we get into these cases. I got lots of gossip to talk about too, but you know how we love a good legal breakdown. So stay tuned for part two that you'll have up in the next day or two. In the meantime, let's be honest together.